Welcome friends. Today we are going over some awesome miracle baby stories. So let's get started. Mohammed, 23 weeks. Miracle mum Layla shares Mohammed's story. Finding out I was pregnant after years of struggling was a delightful feeling, so many emotions I was overwhelmed. My pregnancy felt perfectly normal to finding out why my belly wasn't even showing. Soon to find out my baby stopped growing due to my placenta not working. He stopped growing at 22 weeks. After spending a week in hospital to watch his movement and blood flow function, it was time for a cesarean to bring him into the world at just 31 weeks. Luca's story, 23 weeks. Miracle mum, Brooke shares Luca's story. 2020 was a whirlwind of a year, not just due to COVID but because we found out I was pregnant in February. I was in and out of hospital nearly every week up until I hit 20 weeks in April 2020 when my waters broke, PPROM. I was hospitalized in my local hospital for 3 weeks up until I hit viability at 23 weeks gestation. The day I turned 23 weeks I was transferred to the Mercy for Women in Heidelberg, Melbourne, 3 hours away from my partner and family. That day they told me my cervix was nearly non-existent and there wasn't much I can do other than rest and take steroid shots and hope bub didn't come. 3 days later I started having contractions and 10 hours later I went to the toilet and my membranes had bulged. They rushed me down to the birth suite telling me I'm going to have my son very shortly. I was petrified. I was alone, my partner was 3 hours away and this was throughout COVID. I got in contact with him so he could start to make his way down hoping he would make it in time. Once my partner arrived it was 24 hours of contractions and magnesium and everything else before they rushed me in for an emergency C-section where they had to put me to sleep. I remember looking at the clock saying 9 a.m. and he was born 9:05 a.m. He was taken straight to the NICU where they set him up and he stayed for a while. He got a collapsed lung and an infection 2 weeks after birth. We didn't get our first cuddle until he was 4 weeks old. He suffered a grade 2 brain bleed, inguinal hernia, and NEC while in the NICU, and after 3 months he started to even out. It took 3 tries before he took to cap and after 2 weeks, he went to high flow and was transferred out of the incubator and into an open cot. He then got transferred to the next stage between NICU and Special Care Nursery, SCN, where he stayed for 2 more weeks before going to SCN. He underwent 2 surgeries. The first was laser eye surgery which he had to get transferred to Royal Children's in Melbourne for. Then after he got transferred back, he had to have a hernia repair done which he went back to the Royal Children's for. He arrived back at Mercy for Women Heidelberg where he progressed amazingly with his feeding, going to fast flow test. Then finally the day came when they transferred him to our home hospital where he stayed for couple more weeks and was finally discharged on the 9th of September. 2020. He came home on oxygen and medications, calcium, iron etc. After 2 months he was off oxygen completely and after 8 months he came off all his medications. He is on full solids and full cream milk. It was a hard and emotional road but Luca has achieved so much and has come so far. I'm truly blessed to have a strong son. So far he is just a normal 1-year-old, standing and babbling. 2020 wasn't the best year for me and my family having to alternate days with Aaron, father, and him only getting to visit once a week. It was tough. It's not a year I want to ever repeat but I wouldn't change it for the world because I got to bring my son home and I'm forever grateful for that. Preemies are fighters, and micro-preemies are warriors. The parents to these amazing babies deserve nothing short of lives full of joy, happiness and whatever their hearts desire because our preemies and babies are strong, and because of that we as parents become strong as well. Meadow's story, 23 weeks. Miracle mum Gailey shares Meadow's story. Our story began after 5 years of IVF. We were told we would need a donor egg. We gained only 1 egg, which luckily took. Being over the moon doesn't cut it when describing how we felt. However, there seemed to be bleeding and complications through most of my pregnancy. Then, at 21 weeks my waters broke due to an infection. I was put on an emergency flight and flown 6 hours from home. It was extremely scary. I was told that I would have to get to 23 weeks before anything could be done for our girl. My partner and I stayed in hospital and hoped we would get there. It was 2 long, hard, and emotional weeks. Then at 23 weeks and 3 days, Boxing Day, my infection returned and I was rushed into an emergency C-section. Fear was racing through me as our little girl came into the world. Then we heard the world's smallest cry and we had some hope. I didn't get to see our meadow until the next day. She was so beautiful but so small, only weighing 439 grams, the smallest baby they had delivered at that time. But our little fighter was hanging in. We had 3 bouts of sepsis, a blood transfusion bursting into her leg, and many other complications as well as constant Brady's. We stayed on tube vent for what felt like forever. But Lil Meadow surpassed all the doctor's expectations and eventually moved to PAP and then high flow, then nothing. I stayed at Ronald McDonald House, so I was with her every day of the roller coaster that is NICU. I watched her grow, sitting by her humidity crib holding her hand and getting daily kangaroo cuddles. After 5 long months our Lil Miracle came home with no complications other than a feeding tube which she had for 3 months. She is now a tiny but mighty 18-month-old with no lasting effects of her prematurity. I thank the heroes in the NICU everyday for giving us our baby, and also caring for us like we were family. We are forever grateful to them and the Ronald. Heath's story, 23 weeks. Miracle Mum Ina shares Heath's story. For years I had been trying to have my own baby. Finally it happened for me. I was over the moon. However, on a Friday while I was at work, my waters broke when I was 23 weeks. After ringing an ambulance I was taken to hospital where was given steroids to help my little man's lungs. The doctors spoke to me and told me to prepare for the worst. They said it is rare for a baby at 23 weeks to survive, and if he did survive chances are he would have a serious disability. They recommended not to resuscitate if it came to it. I decided to resuscitate despite all the odds, wanted to give my little man the best chance could. Early Monday morning I got up to go to the toilet and noticed something between my legs. I immediately rang the bell. Turns out I had a cord prolapse. I was told to get into a particular position while being rushed to theatre for an emergency C-section. Remember my whole body shaking and breathing heavily before I went to sleep. I woke up in recovery where I was told my little man had made it. Not only did he not need resuscitation, he came out kicking, and has kicked goals ever since. Heath was born at the IHH on the 25th of January. He was in NICU for almost 4 months facing several obstacles such as large hernias, appendix removal, infections, a cut on his upper leg from birth etc. He got through each one and has come out the other side healthier than ever. Couldn't be any happier with my miracle baby. Lamb now a proud mama. Cannot thank the Miracle Babies Foundation, the NICU nurses and doctors enough for all the support and care was given for my little man. Georgia's story, 23 weeks. Miracle Mum, Danielle shares Georgia's story. George is our 3rd Earth baby. I have had 4 babies in total and countless miscarriages, 3 premature and 1 stillborn, but George is our first micro-premature baby. I will go on record to say pregnancy isn't easy for me. I am not a glowing pregnant type of a girl. I had a cervical stitch put in place at 12 weeks, then from there on, I took daily Clexane injections, was monitored fortnightly by my obstetrician, and had daily progesterone dosages too. I was not allowed to do too much physically and need to take it as slow as I could. I was admitted at 22 weeks and 2 days to hospital with bulging membranes. The hope was that I would sit in hospital on bed rest until George was bigger. George had other ideas. My waters broke. My stitch was cut by my doctor in the hope of avoiding infection, but at 23 weeks and 2 days, we gave birth via classical cesarean to George, 17 weeks early. All 545 grams of him was taken straight to the NICU and put onto a ventilator and numerous other cannulas, countless cords, wires, drips and paraphernalia were attached. We were told our odds for George's survival and decided prior to him arriving that as long as he was willing to fight, we would fight with him. There were many dark days, where we were told to prepare for the worst outcome. George had a brain bleed and at times was on 100% oxygen with nowhere to go. He had all the steroids on board and we just had to hope and wait. He also had possible necrotizing enterocolitis, NEC, of his bowel. Then, he started to have issues with his eyes. a normal occurrence for microprems, which needed 5 rounds of laser and injections on his tiny body at just 32 weeks. We went from ventilators, to CPAP, BiPAP, to ventilators, Deridart, or if be bad and oration on his eyes, or if he was just tired of fighting. Our families got locked out from seeing him, even his sisters too, thanks to the COVID pandemic, but somehow, the NICU just felt like the safest place when we were there. Our little bubble, away from the world. Where George kept up the fight. 129 days was our total stay at RPA NICU, 129 wonderful and heartbreaking days. George came home, a few weeks after his actual due date, without any oxygen or support of any kind. He fought his way to be here and now 9 months, corrected, on, he is the brightest, bubbliest little boy you could ever hope for. He is hitting his corrected age milestones, one by one, and has said his first words, not mum for anyone asking. It was his sister's name. It has been one of the hardest times of our lives, especially when we knew the odds were stacked, unfortunately, not in our favor. However, when I see the sparkle in his eyes, it makes it all worth it. Here we all are, together, and George just keeps amazing us. Valentina's story, 23 weeks. The love and strength of Miracle Mum, Jessica helped guide her baby girl through a difficult first 12 months of life. The family share the story of welcoming baby Valentina into the world. Valentina was born at 23 weeks and 6 days, weighing 725 grams. Mum was having issues at 23 weeks, where she was flown from Port Hedland on the Royal Flying Doctor Service and transferred straight to King Eddie's. It was touch and go all week until Valentina was born on the Saturday. We didn't know what to expect or what was going to happen, as the future looked very dim. Valentina fought hard through a lot of adversity. She had a PDA, patent ductus arteriosus, which wouldn't close and as such had to be operated on at about 2 kilograms. She also battled kidney stones, brain bleeds, and had LASIK on her eyes all before age 1. We kept telling ourselves that everything was going to be okay and put complete faith in the superstar nurses, doctors and specialists at both KEMH and PMH. It was a long road, but after 5 long months Valentina returned home to Port Hedland just before Christmas. Mum Jessica handled everything like a complete superstar, and Valentina drew on her strength and love and is the reason she is with us today. Last week we celebrated Valentina's 4th birthday, and she is now a happy, beautiful, content child who is an absolute angel and superstar. This story is to give hope to all families going through a similar story. Believe everything will be all right, and it will be. Zadie, 24 weeks. Miracle Mum Courtney shares Zadie's story. Zadie was born at 24 weeks and 6 days after a week of sitting in hospital, a few scares and hoping that labor didn't progress. She was 740g and whisked away to NICU. Her time in NICU was, unfortunately, rather eventful. Zadie overcame 2 blood infections, PDA, bradycardia, and apnea episodes, ROP, which led to her having laser at 34 weeks as well as chronic lung disease. After 106 days in the hospital and 1 day before her due date, she was able to come home with us on oxygen as well as other medications. Nothing has been straightforward or easy with Zadie. She always waits till the last minute, and she is truly ready to hit a milestone. Her last big milestone being starting Kindy at the start of this year. We are so proud of the amazing little girl she has always been and the determination she has always shown. Caden, 24 weeks. Miracle Mum Kelly shares Caden's story. Caden was born at 24 weeks and 2 days. At 23 weeks and 6 days I felt something was wrong, didn't quite know what. At 24 weeks started bleeding, the smallest amount. Everyone told me not to worry, but I had already spent my first 20-odd weeks worrying. I went to the hospital and was told it was a burst blood vessel as I had thrown up too much due to HG. I was sent home. Later that day it got worse. I went back. I was flown to KEMH 4 hours away, not knowing what exactly was wrong. After test I was told my baby would be coming within the week, the night of 24 weeks, and one day I went to sleep at 11 o'clock. I woke up at 4 a.m. with the biggest urge to get up. I got up and underneath me was blood. My baby was coming breech. It was then I was signing papers I didn't know what meant, just knew I wanted my baby safe. After being rushed to theatre at 6:30, my boy was born via C-section at 7:04 a.m. after dealing with CLD, sepsis, rhinovirus, laser eye surgery, many months of the jet ventilator. On day 121 we got a phone call. And I never forget the words, "Would you like to take your boy home today?" The words I had longed to hear for exactly 4 months. Now Caden is happy, thriving and weighing just over 5 kilograms. We're so happy to have him home. Harry, 24 weeks. Miracle Mum Hayley shares Harry's story. At 22 weeks and 3 days I was admitted into hospital due to an incompetent cervix and was told to expect to give birth in the following hours. At 22 weeks and 3 days our local hospital was not able to save our son. At 22 weeks and 6 days I had PPROM and was taken to the birth suite. Still not yet at viability, I was only monitored and waited for anything to progress. Thankfully, he held on to exactly 24 weeks when he was born via emergency C-section at 1:30 a.m. He came home after 113 days on a NG tube abs oxygen and weaned off shortly after. He has fought so hard to be here today and achieve what he has achieved, and we are forever proud of him and his journey. Loki's story, 24 weeks. Miracle Mum, Shakara shares Loki's story. We had a harder time than some to get pregnant, including cervical cancer, had operations, and procedures to get me to the point where we had permission to try for a baby. My pregnancy with little Loki was so hard. I had antepartum hemorrhage, placenta previa, preeclampsia, eclampsia, and Hell syndrome. I had high blood pressure up to 192/116 with 3 emergency met calls to keep me and our baby alive. It was a race to see how long we could hold. I was admitted to hospital and for over 5 weeks we were seeing who would give out first, myself or Loki. I had blood tests 3 times daily. I was on magnesium bags with OBS checked every hour and scans twice a day. On the 12th of April I went downhill even more and we were told there would be surgery in 20 minutes to get Loki out. I was the most scared I had ever been in my entire life. I signed the NICU and special care forms, surgery forms, as I had to be cut hip to hip horizontally and cut vertically as well. We welcomed Loki at 6:59 p.m. at 24 weeks and 5 days at 536 grams and 20 centimeters long, one of the smallest babies to be born at Townsville Hospital NICU and survive. Loki has had such a crazy journey. His first collapsed lung was 10 hours after birth. We are now on to day 98 of NICU, with still more to come, but each little step is a step closer to bringing him home. We have gone from doctors preparing us for him not to make it home, to last cuddles maxed out on every machine available, to now with him just moving on to low flow. We have had the privilege of watching our Loki grow on the outside and I just can't be any prouder of our little man. He sure is a fighter. Caleb's story, 24 weeks. Miracle Mum, Sally shares Caleb's story. I went for a gender scan at 18 weeks and 2 days only to be told my baby couldn't be seen due to a lack of fluid around him and I was told I should go to the hospital to get checked. The next morning woke up and I was bleeding, so I presented to the Women's Assessment Unit at the Lyle McEwen Hospital and they did a bunch of tests. Then the doctor came and told me that my water had broken but that I was not in labor. From there we were given 2 options: we could either end the pregnancy then and there or we could continue with risk of getting an infection or going into labor very early. We chose to continue. Was then admitted to a ward for monitoring. When I got to the ward they didn't seem to care about my baby, they just kept telling me he won't survive and you have no choice but to terminate. Eventually they talked me into it, so over the next 3 days we started preparing for the worst thing ever. But then on the Monday, we spoke to a consultant who told us we had a choice not to terminate our healthy baby, so we agreed and were very relieved. Was sent home on strict bed rest and I was only allowed to attend appointments. That went on for about 5 weeks until I was transferred to the Women's and Children's Hospital in Adelaide. Almost 10 days after being admitted I started to get an infection and my baby only had 1 centimeter of fluid around him. From there I was transferred to the delivery suite and was induced. Almost 12 hours later on the 26th of February, 2021 at 1:03 a.m. My son Caleb was born at 24 weeks and 3 days, weighing only 625 g and measuring a tiny 30.5 centimeters long. It was the scariest thing I've ever had to go through. He's now 4 months old and is doing really well. Thank you for letting me share my story with you. Mireya's story, 24 weeks. Miracle Mum, Natalie shares Mireya's story. After a very difficult pregnancy due to severe bleeding which required 3 blood transfusions and a lengthy hospital stay, went into labor at 24 weeks exactly, presumably due to chorioamnionitis. Miss Mireya weighed a tiny 548 grams at birth. She went through quite a lot during her stay at NICU but fought the whole way. There were some very frightening moments and at one point we thought we would lose her due to a nasty infection, however she was just so strong and still is. Mireya is now a happy, healthy and feisty little toddler.